Floyd Lampart is an avid animal lover who has made national headlines by going the distance to aid homeless pets. We told you about Floyd's journey of a lifetime 2 years ago, cycling from his home in the Adirondacks across the country, actually around the perimeter of the United States, covering about 12,000 miles in all. And he followed that up with a ride to Utah last year. And now, next summer, he's getting ready for another big cycling trip. And we are happy to have him here with us this week at the Roundtable. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
And welcome also to my colleague, Jack LeDuc. So you've been an avid cyclist for quite a long time. This didn't start with this trip a couple of years ago.
It actually started in 1994. I rode across the United States. And it kind of gets in your blood. And in 1999, I shipped my bike to Alaska and rode it back to Saranac Lake. And I've also done the capitals of New England as a fundraiser for the Humane Society. So it's been going on for a while.
When did you decide to do these benefit rides for animals?
Well, I've always been affiliated with Best Friends Animal Society out of Kanab, Utah, and the Tri-Lakes Humane Society. And I figured a good way of raising money would be doing a charity bike ride. And it's turned out pretty good. We've had a lot of success and raised a lot of money for it.
What was done with the money? There was a purpose for the fundraiser?
Yeah, the national fundraiser for Best Friends was to help finance a new clinic that they're built. Well, it's already built in Kanab at the sanctuary. The local fund drive was for a sprinkler system and the Tri-Lakes Humane Society on George LePan Highway, which is being installed right now.
You've got the money and that's going ahead?
Yes, yes it is.
Why is that important in
well,
an animal
I've
shelter?
always wanted a sprinkler system in the building, and other people have too, because they have people living in there. The shelter manager lives there, and if anything started, it's an older building. It used to be a restaurant. It's a wood structure building. If a fire did get started, they would never be able to rescue the 100 and some cats and 25 dogs and whatever else they have housed there. The sprinkler system's tied right into the fire department, so they could have a chance at getting some of these animals out, or most of the animals out, knock the fire down enough to help out.
Good cause.
And then the rest of the money goes to the Best Friends Animal Sanctuary and hospital,
right,
in Utah.
Yeah, there were two separate fund drives. The one for Best Friends I had earmarked, where I had put a goal of $100,000, and we're up to about $56,000 on that one. And the Tri-Lakes Humane Society, we reached a goal of $20,000 for that one.
And a beautiful facility there.
At Best Friends?
Yes.
Oh yes, it's gorgeous. We've been going out there probably for 15 years now, volunteering every year. And we've adopted 5 dogs, much to my wife's consternation over the years. And it's something that we really enjoy.
Now, one of the dogs you adopted, you actually discovered on your ride 2 years ago as you were going around the U.S.
That was the Schnauzer Fuzzy. And when I was in El Centro, California, I found him. He was in the middle of an intersection, and I thought he was going to be hit right before my eyes. And I took him back to the motel that night, called up my wife in New York. It was 9 o'clock out there, but it was midnight in New York when I called her and woke her up. The next day she got a hold of the local Humane Society, and I went up there and did a little segment for the local paper and left him there, never thinking I'd see him again. I kept calling back to the Humane Society, and he hadn't been adopted, and my wife kind of got the idea that you know, we had bonded and maybe he would fit in at home. So she contacted my dentist in Lake Placid, DJ O'Neill, who was a member of the Pilots for PAWS organization. He contacted the national Pilots for PAWS people and had Fuzzy flown from Santa Barbara to Farmingdale, New York on a corporate jet while I was pedaling across the prairie. And then he,
unbeknown to you.
Unbeknown to me. And DJ picked him up and flew him back to Saranac Lake, flew him to, from Farmingdale to Lake Placid. My wife went over and picked him up. And when I got home from my ride, Labor Day, 2 months later, they had a celebration, and who was there but Fuzzy? And the story is continuing. He fit right in. He's a great dog.
And DJ, our viewers know DJ from, we did a story just a few weeks ago on
right.
his volunteering to fly across the country to pick up
right.
dogs from high kill shelters and
Right.
bring them to new homes. So
Yeah, I've been with him on a couple of his rescues, and yeah, he's a very devoted guy, a great pilot, and just a good individual.
Floyd, what made you decide to take this 12,000-mile trip on a bicycle, encountering all kind of weather, heat, rain, tornadoes probably? Oh, what made you make a decision on to circumnavigate the country?
I had read years ago about people that did that. There's a handful of people that have done that, going around the perimeter of the country, and it just intrigued me. So I've been planning this ride for like 6 years, and it finally came together with retirement and the blessing of my wife, and I decided to do it in conjunction with it being a fundraiser.
and you have the postmarks to prove that you certainly went around the perimeter. You hit all 4 corners of the U.S.
Yeah, all 4 most geographically distant north, south, east, west post offices, and I have the postmarks and the dates and the signature of the postmaster at each one of those.
And to the east, is that Eastport, Maine? What's
Lubeck.
Lubeck, Maine. is
Lubeck,
the
Maine.
Furthest east.
Farthest south was Key West, Florida.
Yeah.
The farthest west was La Push, Washington. And the farthest north was a little town called Angle Inlet, Minnesota, which is the only part of the United States above the 49th parallel. It's a little isolated piece of Minnesota that's separated by Manitoba. You actually have to ride through 40 miles of Manitoba on a dirt road to get to it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a little tiny piece of Minnesota it's an Indian reservation up there.
How many tires did you wear out?
I still have the same tires on the bike.
Do you really?
One
Yeah.
pair of tires.
One pair of tires, and they went all the way to Utah last year, and they're still on the bike.
Now, you mentioned the trip to Utah last year. You made, this was more of a direct route, although you're trying to hit all 50 of the states.
Correct. Yeah, I went there for the opening of the hospital. They had the opening of the hospital, and they had dedicated a room to my son that was killed in an accident in 2014. And so I said, this is a good way to go out there, and it was kind of a way to settle my mind a little bit because the tragedy was still fresh. And I rode out to Utah. My wife flew out there, and we met, and we had they had a celebration weekend, they called it. And then we flew back. I put the bike in the box, shipped it back UPS. I'd had enough riding for that summer.
Well, Floyd, there's got to be, and you must have come across some danger in riding, probably unfriendly drivers that didn't like to see bikes, or there must have been something like that along the road.
You have, when you travel on the highways, there's always people that like to do what they call a pushback, see how close they can come to you, just for the sake of doing it, you know, and usually young guys. And I've always been very non-committal on a ride and very low-key. You know, if somebody does something, I don't gesture them in any way or yell at them or say anything, because you're all alone, and 2 or 3 guys in a pickup truck that have been drinking can cause you a lot of problems. So you have to be very low-key about a ride like that and just mind your own business. And traffic, I got in a situation in Tucson. I missed the exit on the interstate, and I got caught in some severe traffic there. But I got through it all right. And I was stopped by 5 different troopers on my ride for being in places that I probably shouldn't have been. Bridges and...
Look, they're actually looking out for you?
Well, yeah, they were looking out for me, trying to, you know, get me out of where I wasn't supposed to be. They were all very nice, but the first one was in Boston. I was going over the Tobin Bridge the same day as the Boston Marathon bombings, and I missed the bombings by 3 hours. I'd gotten through the city. And then there were other instances with troopers in New Jersey and in Alabama and Texas and places. They were all very good, but just told me I didn't belong where I was.
Well, making a trip like this, is there any part of the bicycle that wears out quicker than other parts, or gives you more of a problem than for a long distance trip like this? Or are they pretty well solidly built?
Yeah, the bike that was put together by the people at Placid Planet in Lake Placid really performed flawlessly. The only problem I had was in Santa Barbara, California. I had the drive cog on my rear hub was a softer steel than the stainless steel chain that I was running, so it wore it out. Luckily, I found the only bicycle repairman that operates on those particular hubs on the West Coast, and he replaced it for me at no charge, and it was very nice. People are very good on a long ride like that. They really understand what you're up against, and they help you out as much as they can.
Now, you mentioned interstate. A number of viewers may be interested to hear that in out west, bicycles are allowed on interstates.
Certain states, New Mexico, Arizona, parts of California, you can ride on the interstate in Utah in parts, Montana. They do that because the interstates follow routes that aren't customarily followed by secondary roads. And they have nice wide shoulders, and they just, instruct you to stay way off to the side. And believe me, when the cars go by at 90 and 100 miles an hour, you do stay well off to the side.
I bet. And you would often ride at night because when it was cooler.
In the Southwest, from Gila Bend to Yuma, I rode at night, 4 consecutive nights. I would sleep during the day. The tires were actually causing me problems down there. The tubes would delaminate in the extreme heat. So if I didn't ride at night, I couldn't ride. And I would ride all night long. And I had some interesting occurrences down there riding at night.
And 12,000 miles nearly altogether. What was the most difficult leg of the journey?
Oh, probably the East Coast, the populated East Coast, because of the inaccessible roads crossing large bodies of water. The old highways would merge onto interstates, and you couldn't ride your bike on the interstates in the east. So I ended up hitchhiking at the on-ramps for these big bridges. There's 4 or 5 of them, and usually it took a person in a pickup truck that was a biker that knew what you were up against, and they would stop, and I would load my bike in there, and they would take me to the other side where I could get back on the secondary road and ride, and that happened 5 times in the east.
And the Best Friends Animal Society, not only their sanctuary and their hospital in Utah, but the organization must be just absolutely thrilled with the national attention that you've gotten for them and for the cause.
Yes, they are. We're still devoted volunteers for them. We stopped and did a YouTube promotional video at Mission Hills, just outside of Los Angeles. They have a very large facility there. They've taken over the Los Angeles animal control building that the city had built but couldn't afford to staff. They took it over, and now they're running an adoption center out of there, and they've got the kill rate in Los Angeles dramatically reduced for animals. I forgot the exact numbers, but it's phenomenal what they've done out there. And they have an initiative called No Kill LA, and they're starting one others in other cities in the United States. And they have a No Kill Utah also, and the state of Utah is going to become one of the first states to become no kill for euthanization of animals, and that's one thing. That's one big goal that they're working towards.
Now, Tom, this is interesting. Floyd lives, about 7 miles outside of Saranac Lake? How often do you take your car into Saranac Lake, or do you ride the bike most of the time?
Well, the people at the Toyota dealership wonder why I don't put more miles on it when I go in for servicing, but I ride the bike. I try to ride 20 to 25 miles every day.
You do?
Yeah.
Summer and winter?
Summer and winter.
I've seen you out in the winter. Kind of dangerous in the winter?
It can be if you go out in the wrong conditions, but if you wait until the roads are plowed, and then I have a bike that I ride on the railroad bed with wide tires, a fat bike, and that's safe out there. You're all by yourself. Snowmobiles once in a while, skiers, but it's very enjoyable.
And you just did the story a few weeks ago about how that's
about fat tires,
catching on in the
right.
Tri-Lakes.
That's catching on a little bit.
Right.
And you're on that 12,000 mile trip, you're out there alone a lot. What goes through your mind at this time?
Well, you kind of run out of things to think about. You start singing jingles from when you were growing up, television jingles, and I did a lot of praying and just contemplation, meditation. You kind of get into a zone sometimes that you could ride for an hour and not remember hardly anything. I mean, that happens on the highway too, that highway hypnosis type thing. And when the scenery is beautiful though, and you're on a bike, you've got all the smells, the sounds of the birds. Things are changing all the time. Every day is an adventure on a bike.
Prettiest scenery you saw on the trip?
Oh, there was so much of it.
Yeah.
Probably,
Anything in particular?
Probably the Pacific Coast Highway, Big Sur country. That was spectacular, and I hit it just as the cold front was moving out, and they had low-hanging clouds and the brilliant sun, and it was very pretty. San Francisco, crossing the Golden Gate. It was one of those rare days when it was clear.
You mentioned you lost your son last year.
Yes.
Christopher died in an accident near Ithaca. He was living
Correct,
in
right.
Ithaca. And that was the driving force behind your decision last year to
Right.
make the second leg of the trip from
Right.
Lake Clear to Utah again.
Right.
And they dedicated part of the hospital in
Right.
his memory.
Yeah, they had a conference room that they put a plaque on it and with his name on it, and I thought it would be a good way for me to kind of get my head back in place. And in a way it was, and in a way it wasn't, because you have so much time to think on a bike ride like that you think about things that you probably shouldn't be thinking about all the time. So, but it was an enjoyable trip, and I'm glad I did it.
Was he an animal lover as well? Did he?
He liked cats. Yeah, he wasn't a big dog person, but he did like dogs. He had a favorite dog that he would always talk about that we had years ago, Scruffy. And he did like cats. He was going to get a cat, I think. He lived in an apartment, and he was going to get a cat very shortly, but didn't happen.
You're taking this summer off.
I am.
But next year you're already looking at another big cycling trip.
Yeah, I'm looking to travel to Las Vegas for the Best Friends Animal Society National Convention, which is being held in Atlanta this year. And I'd like to do a round trip of that. It would be about 6,000-mile ride. And that would get me all the states in the continental United States and Alaska that I would need to get all 50 states. The final 50th one is Hawaii, and my wife has plans to do that one. So we'll do that one, and I'll rent a bike over there, and it'll do all 50 states.
Now, have you gone through the center of the state yet?
Center of
the country?
No, that's what I'm going to do next year. I've gotten all the perimeter states. On the long ride, I went through 32 different states and 2 provinces to do the long ride. And then I've done other states when I rode across the country, but I haven't got the real center of the United States, the Oklahoma and Iowa and Tennessee, those states.
Pretty flat country for you?
Well, people say it's flat. People said it was flat all the way around the perimeter country, but I got news for them. Not so.
They never did it on a bike.
They never did it on a bike.
Worst part of the country to go through? Toughest part?
Louisiana.
Why?
Louisiana. Well, Katrina did a number on that state years ago, and I don't think it's really recovered. The roads are not too well maintained. The people were friendly enough, but it was just a part of the state that you didn't feel totally secure in. I didn't, anyways. I never had any problems there. I just didn't have a good feeling about parts of Louisiana, and it mostly had to do with New Orleans. I hit New Orleans at night, and I had to get across the Mississippi River, and there was another big bridge which I couldn't cross.
It is a big bridge.
Yeah, so I finally found a bike courier, and he told me about a free ferry across the Mississippi, which I was able to take. But it was getting it was 10 o'clock at night, it was dark, and a lot of people were out, and people that I probably didn't want to stop and talk to. So I just had to keep riding until I came to a motel that my wife had called ahead and arranged for me, because I knew I was going to be in a hard spot right there. New Orleans is a very big city, and I went through big cities. I went through New York and Boston and a lot of other big cities, but New Orleans was kind of the most disconcerting.
Sounds like you had quite a control center in Saranac Lake.
I call her my anchor, and without her I could not have done this ride, because I drove her absolutely bananas, calling her with my cell phone, and she was my rock.
She had a real control center set up.
She did.
This is your wife, Martha?
Martha, yeah.
Yeah.
She's my rock.
And different from when you made your trip from Alaska back in the 90s, you probably could use your cell phone. You probably had coverage almost the
Right.
entire ride. You could use GPS, and so much easier
The only place I didn't have cell phone coverage was out in the Big Bend country in Texas. AT&T is out there, but Verizon is kind of non-existent. So I had 3 days of no coverage. Other than that, I had good coverage all the way around the country. It was a pleasure to have the cell phone. Coming from Alaska, it was just a phone booth, every 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And it was a different situation.
What a difference.
Yeah.
A ride of such length, 5 months and nearly 12,000 miles, how much of a toll did that take on you physically?
Well, I lost 7 pounds on the total ride. Of course, I was eating 4,000 plus calories a day. And physically, the first 2 weeks of the ride were the most difficult until you got into the groove. After that, it was just like going to work in the morning. You got up, you did your thing, you rode, you had breakfast, you rode, you had lunch, you rode, you had dinner, you went to bed. And it became pretty routine. As long as the weather was good, it was very enjoyable. If the weather was not good, it was not so enjoyable.
Any suggestions for bike riders and people that haven't taken up bike riding?
Just to start slow, and when you pedal, I found that you want to pedal better faster than slower. It's easier on your knees. Go to a lower gear. It's not a race. It's the journey, not the destination. The toughest part about a long distance bike ride is the feeling that you're riding away from home. That was the toughest part for me. Once I got to California, the halfway point, met my wife in LA, it was much easier because I was headed home. And that's why I always would fly my bike out to like Oregon when I came across the country, and to Fairbanks when I rode from Alaska, because you were always heading toward home. Every day you were closer to something you really knew and loved.
Psychologically, that's important.
That's most important on a long bike ride. A long bike ride is 75% mental and 25% physical, because when you're out there alone for that length of time, it's very difficult to keep yourself where you want to be. So it's really a mental game.
And again, you've raised a lot of awareness. What you would hope your journeys have done is raise awareness about adopting rescue animals.
Right.
And have people always consider that as their first option.
That should be the first option. There's a lot of animals out there, and a lot of animals looking for that forever home. And once you do it, you won't go back.
Well, good luck on your next leg coming up next summer. And
thank you very
Floyd
much.
Lampart, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. Jack, thanks for being here as well.
Pleasure.
Thank you.